Some good news regarding Mark Williams. We'll get to that. Plus, the annual NBA GM survey is out. How are the GMs discussing the Hornets? We'll get to it all today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your pods, and that does include YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We appreciate FanDuel as always, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's Doug Branson. He's on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, and I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Doug, we have some good, I'll knock on wood, good injury news. It's not often that we get that around these parts, but we have it over the weekend. Hornets PR, after tweeting out September 27th that Mark Williams suffered a strained tendon in his left foot during an offseason workout. Charlotte Hornets PR, October 12th, injury update. Quote, Hornets center Mark Williams has discontinued the use of the walking boot on his left foot. I love that verbiage. Has continued progressing in his rehab and will be reevaluated prior to the start of the regular season. So it means that probably no preseason based on the wording of that tweet, but he'll be reevaluated before the start of the regular season. Hopefully he's good to go. I guess my question is, this is good news, right? Or is there enough of a vague, like, I'm glad that he's out of the walking boot, but I guess the whole reevaluated before the start of the regular season thing, it leaves me like, okay, maybe he's not ready for it. But again, I take this as good news. We've heard from Mark. He told you not to get so worried about it. This is nothing. That's what I choose to believe, even if there's history that says I shouldn't believe it.
I'm not a doctor, but I checked with my primary care physician, and Dr. Feelgood said that you cannot play NBA basketball in a walking boot. You just can't do it. It's not against the rules, but you simply cannot do it. So, yes, this is absolutely good news. I love that everyone that went to Purple and Teal Day, that they were ignoring their kids, they were ignoring their significant others. They were focused on one thing, and that was I spying Mark Williams, looking for the boot, taking a picture, posting it to social media. Everyone was on boot watch. I love that we want more ankle braces and less boots on our centers. And I'll argue with you on one point, which is that this tweet said reevaluated prior to the start of the regular season. That doesn't technically disqualify him from the preseason because tomorrow is prior to the start of the regular season. I honestly hope that they can get him a few minutes in one of these preseason games just as a little warm-up, a little tune-up to get him ready so that he's not, fresh in the sea in the first regular season game.
I'm trying to think of what Mark said when he referenced all the playing points of, I guess this is going to mean I missed training camp. I forget if he mentioned preseason, but I'm just glad that he said that he was going to be ready for basically the start of the regular season. Maybe you're right. That'd be great. I'd love to see a tune-up game for Mark Williams. And that would mean, of course, less Nick Richards. He goes to the bench. Nick Richards did not make the most of his opportunity to see a lot more playing time. You're going to see him continue to be the backup center because they don't have another option, especially if Charles Lee doesn't love going with a small ball lineup. There's just nobody else you can go to. So Nick Richards is going to be that guy. And Mark in the starting lineup, Doug, like pretty solidly in there. And we knew that already. We have had at least, I think, one time where Steve Clifford sat Mark Williams in favor of Nick Richards because Richards was just playing better. That might have been against the Heat, if I'm not mistaken, from last year. But we all know that they've attached themselves at the hip to Mark. He's a part of the core. They view him as a part of the future. And there was nothing in training camp. There was nothing in the first few games of preseason that would suggest, hey, maybe they experiment without Mark. Like, no, they need him. It would be nice to have him out there. And I think we saw that based on how they've played, a couple games here at the Spectrum Center and another preseason game on the road.
Yeah, Mark has the better physical tools. He has significantly better defensive awareness. I think more shot blocking capabilities. Better lob threat, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
Nick Richards? Yeah, significantly.
Just by
right?
size. Yeah.
Yeah,
and Nick's a good lob threat. Like he's got some athleticism, but yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, good lob threat. And so, yeah, he's obviously the starter. And I would also look back to last season and say Nick turned some heads early in the season. And then the more time that he got in the starting role, I think it became clearer and clearer that he projects as a good backup. And I think that's why he was attracting attention in the trade market, whether it be the Knicks or whoever, as a backup center, not as a starting center option, somebody that you could spot start for, injury purposes. So, yeah, he's absolutely, Mark Williams is a vital part of the Hornets' success. And, man, if they could solve the center position, that would open up so many more opportunities for them to explore upgrades on the wing, or maybe if they don't consider Miles Bridges like a long-term option, something there at the power forward position. So, yeah, getting a healthy Mark Williams for the next couple of seasons, I think is really crucial to the Hornets competing and getting LaMelo and Brandon some playoff experience sooner rather than later.
I want to see LaMelo and Mark together. I want to see how that two-man game looks. Pick and roll, decision-making. Mark, is it pick and pop from 15 feet out? Is it pick and pop from the three-point line? We've all been waiting for that for sure from the 5 spot, and even just the pick and lob threat. I mean, I would love to see just any pick and blank. Pick and then pick your poison. That's what I want to see with LaMelo and Mark. I'm really excited to see that two-man game.
And I think we can say pretty confidently that Mark wants to play very badly. So whatever version of Mark Williams, whether we see it in the preseason version or the first game of the regular season version, hopefully it's by the first game of the regular season, because if it's not, then I'm going to start to sweat. If they evaluate him prior to the regular season and he's still not back out on the court for regular season game 1, I am going to sweat a little bit. But whatever version we see, I think we can be confident that it's a version that's going to come out like a Bobcat, because not like a Charlotte Bobcat, but
bad
like
choice of words.
Sorry, why did I?
I don't know why. I don't know. I don't get it.
Because
like a panther,
I'll tell you
like
why.
a panther. Oh no, not panther either.
No, not
God,
panther either.
God,
oh,
almighty.
like
Okay.
honey badger.
Oh God.
How about a honey badger?
That's it. Perfect. Honey badger. Yes. Move over, Tyrann Mathieu. Mark Williams is the new honey badger.
I need him to come out like a honey badger, and I think he will, because I don't even think he even wanted this to be reevaluated or evaluated to begin with. He wants to play desperately, and he wants to shake off this narrative that he is an injury-prone player in every single preseason game that he sits out, and every single time he's evaluated and reevaluated, and I have to set a little calendar reminder that we celebrate, Mark Williams being reevaluated day. That just is one more notch on that narrative, and he wants to shake that. So, hopefully if he's 100% healthy, he's going to play. Because this is not a Joel Embiid situation. Joel Embiid is being held out of the preseason entirely for the Philadelphia 76ers, but that's because Embiid is such a critical part of a team that has playoff, nay, championship aspirations. That's not where the Hornets are. They need to be able to evaluate what Mark Williams is, and if he does get injured again, you don't want that to happen. But if he does, that's not going to stymie a championship run. That's just going to put the Hornets where they might end up anyway, which is going after a Cooper Flag.
Yeah, with just a two-man game, tune-up game for Mark Williams before we hit the regular season. Would love to see it. All right, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
The annual NBA GM survey. How did they discuss the Hornets? We'll get to some of those answers coming up next on Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, look, the season's already started. You can still get in on the action, but the NBA season has not started, so you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, doesn't matter what game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. More Locked On Hornets ahead. the annual NBA GM survey. We get a feel of how the general managers feel about the Charlotte Hornets, whether they think that there's a bright future ahead. Also not really all that much. Like when we get these answers, they don't love the Hornets. They're usually towards the bottom. But we get some interesting answers, Doug. And so I'll give you the steering wheel here. Where do you want to take us as far as the NBA GM survey is concerned?
Well, I think the Hornets got a little respect in this version, much more than they've gotten in previous seasons. And I wonder how much that has to do with the person that's in the driver's seat for the Charlotte Hornets right now, Jeff Peterson, his reputation around the league. Like if other GMs look at your team and think, okay, whatever I think about player X or player Y, I know the person moving this thing is going to move it in the right direction. And so I'll give a little bit more love to some of these players. So for the Charlotte Hornets, they did get a player mentioned, ranked, in the question, which player is most likely to have a breakout season in 2024-25? Tied for fifth place with Paolo Banchero and Cade Cunningham is the Charlotte Hornets' own Brandon Miller with 7% of the vote. Jalen Williams got 13% of the vote to lead all vote getters. Also receiving votes was LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards, although Anthony Edwards won this last season. So I want to know the person that thought, okay, Anthony Edwards got the most votes and probably was the breakout player last season. But, I'm going to throw him a vote again.
So what we're doing is we're like kind of meshing together breakout year, most improved, comeback, all into one. And then they're just throwing all those answers and saying, yep, that's what I mean when I say player with the breakout year. I'm sorry. Anthony Edwards' breakout season, the dude is one of the biggest stars in the NBA right now. Anthony Edwards cannot be your answer. Also, neither can Ja Morant. If you want to say comeback
10%
player.
of the vote. 10% of the vote for Ja Morant.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't make any. Ja Morant, an all-NBA level guy.
Victor Wembanyama, breakout season, 10% of the vote.
What are you talking about? What is this? What is this nonsense? Jalen Williams, okay, that makes sense. Evan Mobley, that makes sense. Paolo Banchero was an all-star last year, so I don't even know if the Banchero answer makes sense. Either way, LaMelo was an all-star. It's more so comeback player of the year for LaMelo, but basically with the way the national perception is around LaMelo, perhaps you could try to fit the square peg in the round hole. That's how I view it here. Either way, I'm glad that some Hornets are getting respect, right? At the end, what this means is that people think there's something special that could happen with Brandon Miller, something special that could happen with LaMelo Ball. And not that I need the national respect, but it's also nice to read nice things about your favorite team.
I think Brandon has a shot here. If they were to give out breakout season award, I think he's got a shot here. If you get rid of Ja Morant, Victor Wembanyama, some of these more ridiculous things, you're left with Jalen Williams, who I think is going to be a third option on an OKC team behind Chet Holmgren and Shai Gilgeous. Mm-hmm. And you've got Evan Mobley. Now that could be one, because that Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Jalen Green, that whole 2021 draft, those top three picks are due for, they really should have had a third-year breakout. Now they're up against a fourth-year breakout. Yeah. All those guys need great seasons. But Brandon Miller is going to be like solidly a second option behind LaMelo Ball this season, and could develop into a first scoring option for sure. And so I think he's absolutely got a shot to be the breakout player of the season if they gave that award out.
Yeah, and I think as far as second-year players are concerned, he's the only answer here that makes sense, right? Because I think in other receiving votes, you have Derek Lively, you have anybody else that's a second-year guy, Amen Thompson.
Derek Lively, please play without Luka. Then talk to me about breakout season. I mean, when you're a lob guy and you got the best lob thrower in the league, I mean, please.
And I guess you can make a case that Derek Lively makes sense there. All right, what's another question you want to go with?
Well, I want to talk about Tidjane coming up, because we'll talk about if he got love or not in this thing. I think I already have. If you're watching, I've spoiled it in the rundown. He did not. But I want to talk about that coming up. So let's do the coaching conversation really quick before we get to that. Which new or relocated head coach will make the biggest impact on this new team? Mike Budenholzer leading the way at 40% for Phoenix. Kenny Atkinson at 20% for Cleveland. J.B. Bickerstaff, the new head coach in Detroit, at 20%. And then behind them in fourth place is Charles Lee of the Charlotte Hornets at 10%. Also Josh Longstaff, who was the head coach for most of the summer league for the Hornets, got a vote for best assistant. Behind Charles Lee, by the way, are two candidates that one was hired before Lee and Jordi Fernandez, but I think they did interview Jordi Fernandez. He got hired by Brooklyn, and then J.J. Redick, who the Hornets were rumored to be seriously considering as well. He's in 6th place with the Lakers at 3%.
Yeah, Jordi Fernandez got hired quickly, too. Like, if the Hornets wanted him ever, then they would have had to swoop in pretty quickly, but that did not happen, of course. And so they have Charles Lee, who always felt like their guy from the beginning, and other coaches were hired even before the Hornets eventually hired Charles Lee, but still it felt like their number one option the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, Charles Lee leading this poll. He's not leading the entire poll, but he is leading the poll of young head coaching candidates that were in serious consideration for a job. So again, you have to hand it to Jeff Peterson for going out and finding that top candidate and honestly convincing them to take on this task. Because after, years of being mired in injuries, but also mismanagement and a lot of reputational damage that has been done to this franchise, I think Peterson had a tough thing on his plate to go to a young top assistant head coach that has championship experience and say, things are different here now. Whatever you've heard around NBA circles about the Charlotte Hornets, it's all different now, and I'm going to sell you on this vision. And he did it successfully, and Charles Lee's here now. He's got the respect of the NBA, but most importantly, Walker, he's got the respect of this Hornets roster right now. They are responding to what he wants them to do defensively. We've seen it in the preseason. And man, I don't know how you could be more excited about something going on with the Charlotte Hornets right now than Charles Lee and what he's been able to transform the Hornets into already.
Feels like the right guy. Plus, some other notes from me. So you're right. Charles Lee is leading the first-year head coaches. Jordi Fernandez getting 7% of the vote to Charles Lee's 10, J.J. Redick to 3. You already went over that. So Charles Lee leading the first-year coaches. Plus, Mike Budenholzer was number 1 on this list, going to Phoenix with 40% of the vote. Just remember, Charles Lee spent quite a bit of time with Mike Budenholzer, both in Atlanta and also once he went to Milwaukee.
They were booties.
They were buddies. They were booty buddies. Oh God, that was terrible.
I guess people do call him Bud. I could have just gone with buddies, but it's Budenholzer.
I was trying to make that work. Nothing. That was actually quite bad to say that. Let's move on.
Bobcat.
No, God, no, stop it. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere.
I know what the YouTube comment section is going to look like. Going to be a lot of pause answers there behind. All right, coming up next on Locked On Hornets podcast, we'll get to some more GM survey conversations here in the final segment. Doug, you said you had one more note on the coaching thing before we move on to Tidjane.
Yes, well, just in general, this is important because I think narratively it is a setup to some of the awards conversations. Like, obviously, things have to happen on the court and things have to be improved for these guys like Brandon Miller and Charles Lee to be considered for awards. But this is a setup. So, like, Charles Lee being in this list, I think if the Hornets were to make a legit playoff run or get into the playoffs from the play-in, I think he would be under serious consideration for Coach of the Year.
Yeah, absolutely he could be. And if they even just sneak in to the playoffs, then he'll still be in consideration with how people view the Hornets historically. All right, what's the last thing you want to finish up with here, Doug?
Yeah, Rookie of the Year, a lot of focus on the rookies in this GM survey always. There were 0 votes for Tidjane Salaun in both the Rookie of the Year question, but also the draft steal question. Who was a draft steal?
Yeah.
Does that surprise you at all?
The steal one does, because Rookie of the Year, nobody's going to vote for him just because of what the story around him was. He's a couple of years away before he really provides a big impact. You and I even are a little skeptical, even after what has been a nice showing in preseason, that he's going to provide a big impact. And even with it going very, very well, still, I just don't know how much run he's going to get. The steal of the draft, though, I thought he would get some votes there. So a little surprised about that one. I know some guys fell, like Klingon went a little bit later than you expected. So probably, I don't know, did Klingon get some of the votes here?
I think so. I don't have it pulled up.
Gotcha.
I was so disgusted. I was so disgusted by the fact that they didn't include my guy Tidjane Salaun, my guy TJ Salaun. They didn't include him at all in the conversation.
Surprising.
Keep sleeping on him, folks. Keep sleeping, because we're dreaming. We're dreaming. You're sleeping. We're dreaming about Tidjane Salaun and what he can do. And Grant Williams, somebody that's been around basketball for a while now, knows a little something or two about the big orange pumpkin, said, quotes, after a practice, I remember when he was drafted, talking about Tidjane Salaun, people said he was like 3 years away. They didn't realize how good a shooter he is and how confident he is with the ball in his hands. The game's going to keep getting slower for him. He's going to start seeing how much of an impact he makes for our team, not just this year, but for years to come. He's going to be really special. Honestly, he works his tail off. Unquote. Walker, remember what happened last time the Hornets took a rookie high in the lottery with questions about his shooting, and then all of a sudden that player came out and shot the lights out. Oh, yeah, that was LaMelo Ball.
I love it. That's how we dismount. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Doug Branson
Keep
with an
sleeping.
Excellent point. We're dreaming. You keep sleeping.
We're in the REM cycle.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you for making us your first listen. We're free and available every single day, anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube. We're picking up on subscribers, getting close to the season. So keep smashing that subscribe button, smash the like button, leave a comment, all the YouTube stuff that all the YouTubers tell you to do. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.
We believe in Tidjane.